Everyone, I'm going to be teaching you today how I color. So I want to preface this video by saying that there's no wrong way to color or there's no wrong way to render an illustration, because that's the beauty of art. Everyone has their own art style, their own way of doing things, and everybody's art style will evolve naturally over time, whether you make that effort or not. So what I want to say today is just how I do it and how I used to do it. So by no means is this a you have to do this or your art sucks, because if you do it this way and if you like it, then that is perfectly okay. And that is great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I just want to show you how I personally do my art, and while I prefer how I do it now over how I did, that still doesn't mean that what is on the side of what I used to do, that doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it isn't good. It just means that it's a different style and that it's something that's filled with things that I often have a lot of beginners do. And because that's something that typically beginners do, I just wanted to teach you that there are different ways to shade. And one last thing, it is my birthday on September 3rd, so if I get this out before then yay, happy birthday to me. Okay, anyways, on to the video. So you might have noticed me doing this pink sketch underneath this blue lines that I'm doing right now, and that is because the pink sketch is my rough sketch, and the blue is actually my line art. And you might be saying, what? Excuse me, that sketch is nowhere near clean or detailed enough for you to start doing line art. And I hear you, I understand. That is what I would have said a couple years ago. But I'm gonna be honest, it is so much easier for me to just do a quick, super rough sketch and then make a sketch / line art layer above it, and that is just how I do it. You'll notice I'm slowing down and I'm making details. I'm going slow so I can make my lines clean, but it still is a sketch and I'm still getting new ideas. I find that for people who have problems with when they do their line art, their art ends up looking stiff and not nearly as good as the sketch did. This is how I combat that. And don't worry if it looks like his face is drooping. I noticed too. I flipped the canvas and I fixed it. So don't worry about that. I also saw it and thought it looked very strange. Thankfully, I do fix it. And actually, I'm really happy with how this illustration turned out, but I will walk you through the process of rendering that first. So I kind of noticed that this guy looked sort of like Sang-woo. And if you know, you know, and I was not really a fan of that. So I decided to fix that with the coloring. So I do that when I explain how I choose my colors. And I genuinely just fix his facial features. I do flip the eye, and I know that I'm not supposed to do that. I know I'm supposed to draw it all by myself. I know. But I couldn't help myself. It just looks so much better, doesn't it? And I added lines, I added hand-drawn lines around it on both sides that I didn't flip, so it doesn't look that bad, right? But I guess now that I mentioned it, you can't unsee it. Whatever, welcome to my world. So his sideburns, what I did was I just kind of drew this cross-hatching along the side of it, and then I took a soft eraser and kind of it's almost like an airbrush. I just softly erased the edges, and I thought that looked really nice as a fade. I know it's a really small detail that you can't really see, but it meant a lot to me personally, and I thought that it looked very nice. So now I'm doing the hair, which I knew that I wanted to be very light and fluffy, and I felt that the eyes, which something that I do in my eyes a lot is that I make the upper eyelid actually just eyelash, but it's obviously not realistic because it's just a solid eyelash, and I usually color that in with the hair color. And you'll see that I still, in my line art, I use messy lines. I use the line art as shading because I feel that my style is very line art heavy. And there we go. That's the finished product. And what I'm doing here for the quote-unquote don't side is I'm just randomly picking colors. I'm just randomly picking what I think looks good. And by the way, the tool that I'm using I will put up on screen now. It is a godsend. It is basically where it's like a lasso tool where you just take it around and you fill in the colors, and it's amazing. So that's what I'm doing. Anyways, so like I said, the left side does not look bad. In fact, most people would say it looks great. But what I'm doing on the right is I'm being a little more whatever. I'm thinking about the colors more. So I'm using most of the colors on a much warmer side, and then the parts that want to stand out, like his eyes, I used a much cooler tone for it. And I still wanted him to have like a similar color palette and stuff like that, but I made the little detail on the shirt green just to match his eyes. So now we're moving on to shading. Wow, this goes by quick. So for the shading, I literally just did a new layer. It's not even a multiply layer because I wanted to go real hard with like, maybe this is what a beginner would do. Trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who's just starting out. So I literally just did a new layer. I still did a clipping mask, but for the colors that you see me using, those are the straight colors I used. There's no multiply layers at all involved. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, there are plenty of amazing tutorials that you can look up. A clipping layer is basically just a layer. It's a new layer above your coloring or line art layer, and you click a button, and basically anything you draw on that layer will confine itself to the contents of the layer underneath. Sorry if that doesn't make sense. So I use the airbrush tool because I also notice people using that a lot, but I try to use it more copiously than I will do on the right. So for the right, as you can see, I used a line art layer, and the shadows are a different color, and they are actually all the same color. It is a light purple on a multiply layer that I like to do, and I think that it makes the shading look much more harmonious. And I'm gonna be honest, I put more effort on the right than I did on the left, and I'm so sorry for that. I wasn't thinking about it in the moment. For the left, I was just saying, get it done, then you can actually have fun on the next one. That was my mindset, and I'm really sorry. Just imagine the same kind of shading on the left, but with those colors. I'm terribly sorry. Anyways, so for hair, how I shade it is I usually think about where is the hair coming from, and I'll typically draw a couple strands with the line art coming out from that point. And it's kind of like highlights where I do a bunch of small lines, and then I'll do these big blocky shapes that you can see me putting in, and I will also curve it around the hair strands to make room for light, and that light is going to come in, and it's going to be on the part of the hair that's sticking out the most. So if a hair is like a circle, imagine it on the side of the circle where the point is the widest. So now hair is usually curved around the head in sort of a semicircle shape, so I'm gonna put the lighting on that side. Also, sometimes I will just, when I'm wanting to get some more dramatic lighting, I will cast a deeper shadow, and I'll go in with another color of a shadow. I didn't do that on this one, but here I am. I'm taking a blending brush, literally any blending brush will do, and I'm smearing the color downwards so it follows the hair motion. It follows where the hair is going, and it's almost like a line art for the hair in a way, where it kind of wraps around the individual strands. Although, I will say this again, do not draw your hair with individual strands. Do not draw every single strand unless you were absolutely going for photorealism. If you're going for photorealism, then amazing, you do you. But if you're going for a style sort of like mine, draw it in big chunks. Especially if you're going for some sort of anime-inspired style, make it in these big blocky chunks, because that is going to look natural. Also, for a little bit of highlight, I do some erasing in the top portion where there's a lot of shadow, and I smear that too, but I will reinforce those highlights once I use the add layer. So yeah, that's sort of how I color. I used a very, very, very light eraser just to lighten up the shading a little bit, because I didn't like how it was super dark and overpowering. And I will use the airbrush sometimes, but I always pair it with cell shading, because shading with just the airbrush, it probably can be achieved, but not easily. and it makes my life way easier, and I think personally it looks better with my style if I use cell shading. But I will sometimes blend that out, so it's not quite an airbrush, it still looks natural and not just like you used an airbrush. So you can see the blending I did on the nose, and you'll see me blend out the cheeks later. And I tried to erase some of it to make it look more subtle, and I also blended the cheeks with the eye bags just to make it look more natural and not like I used an airbrush. Like I said, on the left, there's nothing wrong with how I did the blush, but it does kind of look like I just used an airbrush versus my other side. So then again, on this side, I am not using an add layer or anything like that. No layer settings, just a new layer, clipping mask on normal. I'm actually just using a light pink color, where I noticed that a lot of beginners will individually pick the colors for their lighting. And it doesn't look bad. In fact, I actually kind of like this side. But when I use an add glow effect on this side, I think on the lighting I did a better job of doing very similar lighting. I think I added bounce lighting and stuff to the right, which honestly, I get it. That wasn't fair. I'm sorry. And on the right side, I am also blending the lighting a lot. And one thing about the add glow is that it literally adds a glow. In case you couldn't tell from the name, it adds more dimension to the lighting, I think, and I always lightly erase, or I always lower the opacity of a layer that I'm using lighting on, because I never ever want it to feel overpowering. I always want it to feel subtle, like it belongs there. Something that I also do is usually I use a warm light. That's just the kind of lighting scenarios that I typically like to put my characters in. So I will usually use some sort of light, kind of yellowish orange color for my lighting, but this time I decided to do something different, and I used a blue, like kind of a dark navy blue, so it would be more subtle on the layer, and I applied it to the opposite side of where the light was coming from and lowered the opacity. I don't know, I just thought that was nice. I also realized I forgot to fill in the pupils, so I did that on both. And I don't know, the opposite lighting isn't super obvious, but I think it adds a lot. Another thing that I always do is I will duplicate the line art layer. I will blur one of them and put that underneath the original layer and then lower the opacity of that, and I think it just completes the illustration. So if you saw a significant change with the line art or something, that's what I did. I do that on almost every one of my pieces. I add a soft light effect to it. Yep, there you go, I just did that. I add a soft light to the illustration with a little bit of blue on one side, a little bit of red on the other, and there we go. I add a little bit of shadow to his chin just to imitate what a kind of like a 5 o'clock shadow, because I did give him some, like a scruffy beard, and there we go. That is it. Sorry that I couldn't be more in depth. I tried slowing down the illustration process a lot more, but the way that my program captured it, it did not work out that way, so sorry. Let me know if you want me to go back and break it down more. So thanks for watching.